Hello and welcome to the Idiot Book Nook. My name is Blazewing. My pronouns are they, them.
My name's Lady Punnet. My pronouns are primarily she, her, sometimes they, them, today, they, kind of day.
And I'm Kirishai. My pronouns are she, her, sometimes they, them. Today's a her day. And it's the
Herder?
dress. Herder.
Yeah.
Herder.
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 Herder. Herder.
All right, now that we've got the Swedish chef in this morning.
Remember how we had a whole Swedish chef thing with I think with the Prospero School, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
When it was Herman Moderna.
I have that clip actually.
That's awesome.
That was a good clip.
We're
So
reading
good.
from Fame Has Its Price by the Vampire Jack Townson today. But first, if you'd like to follow along with us, and you'd like to see kind of what we're all about, and you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at lanktr.ee/idiotbooknook. You'll be able to find links to our podcast, to our YouTube, to the Twitch, to all of our individual projects out on the net. You'll be able to follow us and see what we're up to. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
Before we get into the book, as always with this book, we have a trigger warning because there are some pretty heavy topics. We do understand that this book may not necessarily be for everyone, and you are welcome to tune out if this isn't your style, or if we start to delve into territory that you may not necessarily be able to deal with. With that, the trigger warnings from Jack. Before you enjoy your reading experience of The Vampire Jack Townson, Fame Has Its Price, please be aware of the following trigger warnings: rape, moments of discrimination, graphic violence, grooming. Quote, "As someone who has had their power taken from them, I believe in the importance of consent in all things. However, to shy away from these topics is to not make them go away, but to be blind to them." And with that, we get started on Chapter 8 of Fame Has Its Price. The Man in the Suit. The strange, lithe man curled in on himself, eyeing me sharply from over one shoulder.
Claude,
The man started again.
when was I going to hear about this?
He asked. His voice was smooth and steeped in a crisp English accent.
Oh, English. Okay.
One piece of the mystery was solved. The scruffy bartender's name was Claude, though I was still missing much more important details about why my presence there was seemingly so why my presence there was seemingly so vexing. Setting the glass down, Claude leaned in closer to the stranger.
Hey, listen. It was a need-to-know sort of thing. Only people on the inside had any knowledge about intentions last night. Myself, a few scouts. That's about it.
The man's hand shot forward like a bullet from a gun, a fist gripping a handful of Claude's salt and pepper tufts. He wrenched him closer to the mysterious face so that they could stare eye to eye with one another.
You filthy little shit,
he snarled.
I am the inside. Who the fuck do you think you're talking about to? You're talking to. I am not one of Alexander's C-list fuckboys. I am the fucking Hound. Do you understand?
As his words spewed out in violent, quiet rage, the man jostled Claude's head with a beat of every consonant.
The eye in the shadow that takes what needs to be taken, breaks what needs to be broken, and it destroys any snake in its path. If he is the alpha, then I am the omega, you insolent fuck!
At last, the stranger released Claude with a hard flick of his wrist, the bartender stumbling back into the drink table behind him. Glasses and bottles tumbled to the floor and shattered.
Stop trying to eat me. Stop trying to eat me. Holy fuck, man.
Claude growled, doing his best to right himself. He massaged the spot on his head where the stranger had almost ripped out his hair.
I was just saying, you've been away from the city. How would you have known?
The aggressor stood to his full height, and that was when I saw it. He wore a black suit, a red dress shirt, and a tie. This was the one Alexander wanted me to avoid. It was clear why. I could sense it better than ever before. Something uncanny, supernatural, and dark. Waves of power flowed from this man. He didn't look like a hard fight by his appearance alone. A clean suit, slicked back hair the color of mud, a 5 o'clock shadow, and the same piercing red eyes as my own. It was his presence that sent my gut into a frenzy. Every instinct in my body screamed one word: run. However, despite that conscience that usually ruled me from my shoulder, I stood firm. In fact, there was a new, daring feeling that vibrated just beneath my ribs that I couldn't explain. It was a fire. It was courage. Or perhaps, because I had already experienced death, it was simple, stupid arrogance. I don't know what your problem is. The words tumbled from my mouth before I could stop them. But I would suggest you stop being a prick. If you want to talk to me, I'm right here.
Honey, no. Honey, no. This is no time to be an Isabella in a friggin' Val world.
That was enough to send him into a fury. His hand found the material of my hoodie and raised me in the air, my bare feet dangling over the floor. Eyes of crimson rage pierced what was left of my soul as he held me there for a moment, fangs bared in full ferocity. My first official night as a vampire, and I had already involved myself in a bar brawl with a powerful member of the undead. Perfect.
Who do you think you are?
He glanced back to Claude.
This little pissant has dubbed worthy of my sire's kiss? Oh, okay, I see what's going on now.
His wolf's focus shifted back to me.
To accept the dark gift so eagerly, gobbling it up like lava, how long did it take for him to turn this one? A month? A week?
He quite literally spat the words in my face. My hands gripped his wrists to keep myself steady, knowing that he could easily destroy my new favorite piece of clothing, or better yet, me. Still, that new, flippant little voice in my head couldn't shut the fuck up. I slipped the word down at him. A day. His fists wound tighter in the fabric. I felt it pull more snugly against my skin. The stranger's narrow glare widened with some other emotion. Shock was there. But there was something else. Was it pain? His thin lips around those sharp teeth trembled.
Did you say?
He started, his feet guiding me away from the bar and closer to the dance floor.
A fucking day?
He screamed out before violently launching me into the air, my body landing on the wood and sliding toward the other side of the room in a crumpled heap. Surprisingly, there was no pain, but I could tell something definitely broke, even without my nerves firing. The bone jostled loosely near my stale lungs.
Alexander is mine and mine alone.
The stranger continued, stalking me like a wild cat.
Don't you dare think for even a moment that you hold any sort of claim over him, especially after a fucking day. Not after all I've been through, not all the trials, all the pains and torment, especially everything I've sacrificed. And he adopts you after a fucking escapade like you're fucking Orphan Annie.
He was upon me again, his arm stabbing downwards to take a hold of my ankle. A twist of his hip and a pivot of his heel sent my body spiraling through the air against the staircase. Something else crunched in my back. I didn't even have time to blink. He was instantly over me once more. Shit. I wondered just how old and strong he was. The power scaling of vampires was not being something I understood yet. I saw the Hollywood movies, I knew the folklore, but there was still a lot to learn about what was real and what was fantasy. I mean, I did have a reflection after all. For all I knew, this guy had a good few hundred years on me. Hands clasped my throat, a familiar feeling from my time with Alexander, and I couldn't just help but grin up at the stranger. He was jealous. That much I did understand.
You're nothing, aren't you?
He sneered into my face, his cold breath sliding across my lips.
Insignificant. A toy for Alexander's pleasure and nothing more, I'm sure. Replaceable.
He threatened.
I can show you if you prefer.
The stranger growled and gnashed his teeth in my face, his hold constricting, tighter and tighter, as if to crush my voice box. Oh my. Sorry. I pushed myself to speak anyway. It didn't work the way you wanted. His eyes twitched, hands releasing only slightly.
Sorry, guys, one moment. Nugget, go away. He's going dangerously close to the power cord, and if he does that, then my laptop's going to turn off. You need to stop. There's a reason people say don't work with animals, people. Ahem. What? What do you mean?
That British tone had started off so cool, but at that point, I started to wonder how Lamont dealt with how nasally it sounded day in and day out. It began again. That Orphan Annie line. I sputtered. The way it was worded made it sound like Annie was into fucking orphans, which, honestly, I don't know what movie you saw, but that's not how I remember. My words were cut off as the first strike came, blinding me from the world as fist after fist slammed into my brand new face. I saw stars. Splashes of blood sprayed against my cheeks from my nose and onto the carpet under my shoulders. There was no way to defend myself from such a powerful foe, but I couldn't give him the satisfaction of winning either. I did what came naturally. It was the way I unnerve every opponent and bully from my past, the way I always managed to win, even when I had lost. I laughed. I laughed to my heart's content as haymaker after haymaker landed against my jaw. I imagined the bloody scene was like something from Fight Club with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. He stopped for a moment, his fists splattered with scarlet, as he stared down at my mangled face.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
He whispered, a look of complete bewilderment taking his features before he was suddenly gone from sight. Abruptly, frustrated growls resonated, drifting further away from me, accompanied what sounded like a different physical struggle. I pushed into a sitting position against the stairs, struggling to open my swollen eyes in time to see my first real vampire fight. Claude had taken hold of the man's jacket, pulling with all his might and sending him hurtling backwards. Both vampires toppled over one another before scrambling to their feet to come face to face.
Aiden!
Claude roared. Another piece of information was gained. The man in the suit, the furious Brit, the jealous boy, his name was Aiden, and he was fucking pissed. Claude continued.
I don't want to hurt you. I know I don't stand a chance of defeating you, but I'll tell you something. I can cause some damage that will put you out of work for a week. And Alexander won't take kindly to that. You got it?
I could almost see the smoke erupting from the suit's ears. It didn't take much to set off this Aiden guy. He was as relentless as a rabid animal. Aiden fired a vicious jab at Claude's face, barely telegraphing. It landed with the same force as a speeding truck, knocking Claude back on his ass. I froze. Aiden had barely moved his hip, a trick of perception, the sign of a man who truly knew how to fight. A move like that made it impossible for Claude to have seen where the punch was coming from. The suit wasn't just reckless. He was dangerous. Coming up, I had experienced my fair share of fights. My adolescence produced many adversaries well versed in the language of street combat. One needed to know how to defend themselves in the underworld. My time with Brad had taught me that quickly. Drug dealers came equipped with guns, knives, all sorts of nasty tools. All I ever needed was my fists. In all of my years, there was only ever one man that used the same technique. Aiden had just employed, and that man was the only one who ever put me to the ground. Claude seemed proficient enough as well. Claude seemed proficient enough as well, however. He was already squared up and ready to go. But as he went to block another attack, he miscalculated the speed and took the punch straight to his mouth. A trickle of blood added a streak of red to his salt and pepper whiskers.
Oh, look. Silly me. I seem to have struck you too hard. Shall I pick you up a tampon for that pussy of yours?
Aiden threw his head back, allowing a shrill cackle to pervade the open air. I couldn't help but watch in a mixture of horror and admiration. This man was insane, but he was skilled. I couldn't stop myself from wondering, beyond the fact that he was a badass vampire, who the fuck was this guy? Claude snarled, his guard hand coming down to check the stream of red as it dribbled onto the floor.
Nice shot.
He grumbled before sending 2 follow-up punches in retaliation. A jab and a cross, both casually parried by the suited man. It was like Pitbull playing with a puppy. Claude threw more shots in his direction. Aiden's head simply bobbed from side to side.
This is adorable, truly. But I haven't even activated my gifts. Do you really want this to be the day I land you at Cadavers?
Aiden evaded another punch, but Claude closed the distance. His body sailed between both of Claude's arms as his forehead slammed hard into Aiden's. The attack caused his skin to erupt at last, exposing his skill, sending more blood into the air and down his face.
Gotcha, fucker.
Claude snarled before firing a brutal shot at Aiden's side. The vampire hardly budged, and then another 3, 4, 5, followed by a kick to Aiden's stomach. As the onslaught came, the suit whipped his claws sideways, slashing deep into the raw area above Claude's eye. A waterfall of blood interrupted the bartender's vision, and he fell back. He squeezed his soaked lids shut, trying to keep his guard up and ready, but Aiden was already in position.
I'm bored.
He sniffed.
You're boring me. This ends now, mongrel.
What happened next made me wonder if I was hallucinating. Aiden's arms became a blur as each shot landed faster than a hummingbird's wings against Claude's chest and sides, the sound of the raid like machine gun fire. This must have been the gift Aiden referred to. Blood splashed from Claude's mouth and out onto the suit of his attacker, but I was amazed to find the burly tender wasn't ready to give up just yet. As Aiden's punches continued, Claude closed his eyes. The area of the assault began to sound less like soggy meat and more like concrete. Aiden paused to witness the damage. Staring down at his hands, Aiden's knuckles were not covered in just Claude's blood, but now his own. The skin ripped and torn, exposing raw muscle and bone beneath.
Impressive.
He grumbled, seeming to know what Claude had done. My mind still felt mortally slow and hardly able to grasp anything I was witnessing. Before Claude could go on the offensive again, Aiden vanished. The weary salt and pepper vampire scanned the empty club, looking at me.
Where did he go?
Wham! A blow to the back of the head sent Claude to a knee. Wham! Another to the side of the head. Aiden appeared and disappeared as his target fell, his palms against the floor. Weary blue eyes left their downward cast to find me again with a look of apology.
I tried.
Aiden appeared at Claude's front. His right arm wrenched upwards as those broken and bloody knuckles caught just beneath my defender's chin with a crunch. The force was enough to send him through the air from his knelt position, his body flipping unsettlingly through the club, before landing with a crushing impact into one of the tables, broken, beaten, and unmoving. Aiden stood back to his full height, a grimace cast upon his face as he began to shake out the pain that must have been left by the fight. He snarled, cracking his knuckle, flexing his joints, forced him to wince.
You're so lucky. I don't kill you for even making me
He said to the still motionless Claude. Aiden adjusted his lapel and smoothed his jacket with both bloody hands, though he still appeared a frazzled mess. Fancy dress shoes clomped against the hard wood surface. Flecks of fresh blood splashed against the polished floors. The skilled combatant made his way towards Claude again.
If you know what's good for you, you'll stay where you are long enough to think about how silly of a mistake you made. Now.
He turned back towards me.
Where were we?
To his surprise, however, I was already right behind him. I hadn't meant to. I fully intended just to stay on those steps, a broken mess, but something in me stirred. A fire awakened and a core tenet had been triggered. I fucking hated bullies. Without hesitating, my balled fist met the man's face with fury, knuckles shattering against his jaw as the bone shredded through his skin. His face contorted from the new strength I mustered as his head whipped, his neck cracking with a snap. That fancy suit flipped open as his body lifted through the air and onto one of the chairs just beyond the dance floor. The legs of the chair skittered against the ground with a screech. His body slumped against it. Genuine shock took us both as we stared at one another from the distance. My chest heaved. One of my ribs was definitely still broken, the edge of the bone pressing against my soft flesh. One wrong move and it would rip right through. Aiden growled as composure took him again.
Who the fuck are you?
He howled, less of a question and more of a violent scream of desperation. I don't know yet, but I'm not going to stand by while some fucking lowlife in a cheap suit takes his jealousy out on people who don't give a shit. I shouted back, my fists falling to my sides. A growl erupted from my chest, and it was unlike any sound I had ever made before. I reminded myself of a bear, or a wolf, or a lion. Try having a civil conversation instead of acting like a jilted 12-year-old. Aiden raised himself from the chair and started to hobble in my direction, his lip busted, his eye bleeding, knuckles bloody and shattered. The once fancy suit was now covered in a combination of everyone's vital fluids. But like the villain in the classic horror movie, he still kept coming. This is Lamont.
Boys!
We both stopped in our tracks as the familiar voice shattered through the heat in the room. At once, our attention snapped to our maker as he entered from the elevator. One thing was certain. Alexander Lamont did not look pleased. And that's going to cut it. That's going to cover it from Chapter 8, from Fame Has Its Price by the Vampire Jack Townson. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at lanktr.ee/Idiot Book Nook. You'll be able to find links to our podcast, to our YouTube, to our Twitch, and all of our individual projects. And for this episode of the Idiot Book Nook, I'm Blazewing.
I'm Lady Punnet.
And I'm Crittershy.
And we'll see you guys next episode.
Bye-bye.